Welcome back. The nonprofit organization StreetLab creates pop-up programs for public spaces throughout New York City. These programs are part of their overall goal to enhance the urban environment, strengthen neighborhoods, and bring the residents of all 5 boroughs together. Co-founder and executive director of StreetLab, Leslie Davol, joins me to discuss this effort. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, can you just introduce StreetLab and share the inspiration behind it?
Sure. StreetLab is a nonprofit that creates and shares programs for public space. It's about a vision of the city where we have places that inspire, where all residents have places to gather and ways to connect. And we use a pop-up approach to make that happen. It started with reading rooms. We've expanded beyond that to a whole bunch of different programs. It's been going for about 10 years. We now do about 350 pop-ups across the city every year. Everywhere we go is by request, and we're also making our programs into kits for other cities.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, the inspiration, I started it with my husband. It started somewhat organically. We were raising kids in the city. We just thought about what we wanted to see and have in our own neighborhood. It started with a vacant lot across the street from where we lived, where we thought this would be a great place for outdoor movies. And then it moved on to bigger projects, a library and a storefront. And then we thought, how can we do this in more neighborhoods? And that's where the idea of pop-up came about.
Now, what sets StreetLab apart from other organizations working in community engagement and public space activation?
It's, first of all, maybe the design of our programs. They're based around very simple activities that everybody can do together, things like reading, drawing, playing. But there's a lot of thought that's actually gone into those programs. And you can see, if you look at pictures on our website, we spent a lot of time on the design of sort of furniture to create a welcoming environment. We put a lot of thought into the materials that we provide, to have them in different languages, to have them be special and enjoyable. We have staff that make the experience good. And we've even brought, capacity to design things in-house. So our reading room, for example, has pop-up books that are maybe fragile that we share again and again in a lot of neighborhoods. The other thing I think that makes us unique is the locations that we go to. As I said before, everywhere we go is by request, but we prioritize neighborhoods that have been underserved, that are low income. And that's in fact 78% of our work this year. But we also go to places like Times Square and Chelsea Market, and then we're making our kits for other cities.
I think also, just from what I've learned so far, the fact that it's focused on education and youth is also so unique because I've seen a lot of pop-ups throughout the city, and they're usually targeted towards just an older audience. But to see something that's kind of family oriented and something for kids, I think that's pretty amazing. Can you just talk about how these installations transform public spaces into community hubs? Because that's also very important. A lot of the pop-ups that I go to, it's it doesn't feel like community. It's fun, but it's not community oriented. So can you expand on, how your organization does that?
Sure. Yeah, I think of some of the places we go. We've been doing a lot of work on streets. We go to all kinds of public spaces, but a lot of work in recent years on streets. And when you think about it, you've got a piece of asphalt, so you look at that, how are you going to make that an inviting place where people want to hang out and talk to each other? So one secret is simply seating. So we think about where can people sit down and do activities. And, if there were a lot more seating in the city, maybe we'd have more social life in the streets. So seating is one thing. The other thing is just providing something that for people to do that has a low barrier to entry, right? So it's not a big commitment. And as you said, we do have a lot of programs that appeal to kids. And that's a big part of what motivates us, is to sort of create memories for them in their neighborhood.
Now, some of these, you mentioned a few of them, but can you talk about the different types of pop-ups available? I know that I think sometime in the past, BronxNet actually covered one.
Yeah.
And it looked really cool. So can you just talk about some of the different types that your organization offers?
Sure. You're talking about a street we did with a school, PS32, in East Tremont and Belmont area. So we have several different programs. And again, I mentioned that we started with a reading room. We have our Read program, which is a reading room. It's a collection of books. They're great books. They're books for all ages. They're, beautiful picture books. And then we have Draw, which is a pop-up art studio with really great materials. and some prompts and things for inspiration. We have a program called Play, which is an obstacle course, and that was developed during the pandemic, specifically for the streets to just create, transform streets into play spaces. We've got a program called Explore, which is actually about exploring urban nature and looking at things closely under a microscope or with a magnifying glass, things that you might see but not have noticed before in a way, the leaves and the trees around you.
Now, in your experience, which one of these would you say is the most popular or impactful organized for the community?
We've been doing a lot of play and another program called Street Marker, which is just chalk, but we make it possible for people to create beautiful murals together with stencils and a variety of other tools. Those have been really great, in particular on some of the new streets that are now have been turned into community spaces. It's a program the city started during the pandemic called Open Streets. And there's some actually right around here, I can tell you, Evelyn Place. And then several years ago, we went to Kingsbridge Terrace with the Cambridge Heights Community Center to close a street. But yeah, it's we mix these programs up, and sometimes, it's about the mix, and we put a reading room next to where sports activities are happening, for example. So they're all really popular. And I think that, the way they have impact, one of the ways is we do come back to a lot of locations week to week. There's a number of locations where we work in that way.
That's amazing. I love that because I think like if I were to be a kid and I had this really fun experience, I don't want to feel like, oh, well, that was a nice day. Like, you want it to be something that's like a part of their community, a part of their upbringing. So I think that's amazing. Can you just talk about how this actually benefits all the communities involved?
Yeah, I mean, it's what happens is again pretty simple, but also very moving, and it's something maybe that happens naturally in some places, but you sort of have to engineer it in others. And you provide an activity for people to do together with strangers, and they sit down and they read a book or they start drawing, and you really see people in a different way, right? And there's a feeling of connection. And so, people love it. They're transformed, space is transformed, and they walk away feeling more connected to the neighborhood, to their neighbors, to the city. Yeah.
And I also want to highlight the Bronx for a moment. I'm sure that other areas in New York maybe have similar challenges, but I know for the Bronx, a lot of parents are hesitant to just even allow their child to play outside. How has that been possibly a challenge for your organization to overcome while you create these pop-ups?
Well, I definitely feel like the Bronx is a place where we could do so much of this work and have great impact. And it's a place which has historically been, there have been a historic lack of investments in things like public space. So we are working with a lot of groups. We have an initiative right now, actually, that is really ideal for the Bronx. And we're working with a lot of Bronx groups, and we hope to work with many more to create more open space. And it's got the support of the city's Department of Transportation, that really wants groups in the Bronx to create open streets and to come into the program and to benefit from having more community space. So we've been working for many years in the Bronx. There have long been play streets in corners, of the borough. We started out in 2013 at Lyman Place with Hetty Fox and her play street, and then moved on to Jennings Street, where we're actually going to be this week. We go weekly to Jennings Street. We've been working with Lonnie Hardy and her Caldwell Youth program there for many years. So there's a lot of great organizations that we have worked with in the past in the Bronx, and that we'll continue to work with.
Now, I understand one of your initiatives is the Equipment Library for a Public Space. Could you share more details about how this program works and what type of equipment is available to the community?
Yeah, this is a new resource that we started pretty recently, again, with the support of the city's Department of Transportation. In this case, we also had support from the city's Department of Small Business Services to start it. But the idea is basically that any group that wants to have a public event in a public space can borrow equipment from StreetLab, have it delivered for free, and have it help them create an environment where people will linger, where they can do activities, where you can have programming. So groups can borrow our reading room, they can borrow tables and chairs, we'll deliver it. And yeah, again, we hope that many people will take advantage of it. In fact, on August 12th, the Bronx Artworks is going to have Bronx Artworks is going to have an event at a street on 153rd Street where they're going to borrow a lot of our gear for their event.
Now, there's also
Bronx Arts Factory. Sorry, got that wrong.
No problem. Now, I understand there's another way that you're going to connect just to the community with local artists and educators. Can you expand on that, especially the artist part? I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that we've worked with artists in the past and educators. Our programs, as I said before, are pretty simple. So what they do is provide a platform and a place, an environment where so much can happen and that you could customize, right? So StreetLab does work citywide. And we do these programs again and again, all over the city. That's part of the beauty of it, trying to make that kind of universal experience, but they can be customized. And so everywhere we've gone, sometimes we've worked with local libraries that come out and do read alouds. We've worked with artists that run our chalk program that, sort of lay out a pattern and get everybody engaged in making the mural on the street. So there's a lot of ways for artists and educators to get involved.
Now, I understand that just the entire organization has been around for 10 years, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that you started it, just as a parent, like looking for places. I'm sure now that your children are probably a lot older, but you're still doing this work, which I think is amazing. What inspires you to continue to kind of recreate what you did for your children, for other children in the community?
It's about places, right, in your memories of where you grow up and your feelings about, there have been so many articles that point to place is so important for the determinants of all kinds of things about life, right, and how you end up. And so I think that creating memories for people about their neighborhood and feelings of connection is so important. Our work has really grown in the past, just with the pandemic and the new focus on space and community and sort of the health benefits of all of that. Our work has tripled since the pandemic. And so right now we're just trying to keep up with the demand and to find new ways to work with groups across the city. We also have something coming up where, there's heat is getting, of course, more of a crisis in the city, and it disproportionately affects areas like the Bronx, where there's less tree cover and all kinds of things. So one of the new programs we're working on is a pop-up cooling station. We have the ability to pop up. We can design. We have these community networks. So we're hoping to roll that out very soon.
Well, we have about a minute left. Can you just explain, what are some of your future hopes or plans for the organization?
Yeah, I think it is, new programs, as I mentioned, that we're hoping to roll out. We're always looking for ideas. We learn a lot every time we're out on the street, what communities need, what brings people together, what works. And so I think, and then also this area that I mentioned before too, of expanding a little bit beyond just providing programming to helping groups create and test open streets or new public spaces. So we really do want to support groups. That's our initiative that we have with the DOT's support. And so we want to support groups that want to try an open street, close it for a couple of days, see what that feels like. Think of all kinds of programs that they can bring and other groups they can get involved. We'll help with permits. We'll help with the barricades, closing the street, and outreach. So that's a whole area of work that I'm really excited about because it has so much impact. And it's also a chance for us that when we pop up, to go more deeply into neighborhoods and work closely with groups over many months.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing this organization with us.
Thank you so much.
If you want to learn more about the amazing pop-ups and efforts of StreetLab, please go to their website at www.streetlab.org or follow them on social media at StreetLab. Stay tuned, we have more open for you right after this.